That is fungal. Sometime last year. You have no idea how excited I am. I can feel it in the air. Spring is here. Now I can't just feel it in the air, I can see it, especially with my Anthuriums. And in today's video, I really just want to show you all of the beautiful growth that I'm seeing on all of these plants. And I also want to assess their root health, maybe chop back a few leaves, and overall discuss my strategy with my Anthurium collection over the next couple of months. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Next week is officially the beginning of spring in Australia, and I know geographically speaking it should be the 21st, I think, of September. In Australia we think that's too hard, so we officially start the seasons of the 1st of a month. So 1st of September is the beginning of spring, 1st of December is the beginning of summer, 1st of March is the beginning of autumn, and 1st of June is the beginning of winter. Keep in mind, our seasons are the opposite to the seasons of somebody in the Northern Hemisphere. Now in the last week of August, and things are getting slightly better, but to be honest, from a human perspective, I don't really notice the improvement in conditions just yet. But if you're keeping a close eye on nature outside as well as inside of my house, I can definitely see an increase of growth. With my Anthuriums specifically, they really just decline during the first part of winter, and I get no new growth, and or the growth is significantly smaller. I definitely don't see any inflorescences, but as soon as we're approaching spring, I start seeing all of my Anthuriums suddenly throwing out new inflows, and that's when I know that we have turned a corner. Shortly thereafter, I see most of my Anthuriums growing new leaves as well, and over the next 2 to 3 months I should see fairly rapid progression of growth. They don't like the super hot summer months, so really spring is where most of this growth is going to happen. Before I take you a bit closer, let me explain the conditions in this room a little bit. This is my bedroom. It is a south-facing bedroom, and you are currently in the window. I'm in the Southern Hemisphere. South is the worst exposure, especially over winter. I get very little natural light coming through that window, so these plants really rely on artificial light year-round. These lights are somewhat unintrusive. They are the Mother Life Spectrums. I've actually got 2 of them, or well, technically they're 4. They're 2 stacked on top of each other, extended vertically. I've got one here, and usually I have one here, but that would kind of be a little bit in my face for filming, so I just park it on the side for now. But those are the lights that actually make these plants grow. If it wasn't for the artificial light supplementing, it's not even supplementing, it would honestly just be pretty much pitch black in this room if it wasn't for the lights. One moment. Like, of course the camera's gonna adjust the light a little bit, so it's not gonna look quite as dark on camera as it is in real life, and I still have my filming light on, hang on. There's just no chance that these plants would actually have a good time if it wasn't for the grow lights supplementing light or making light in the first place. Let's turn it back on. I have a discount code for you guys in the description down below as well if you want to learn more about these lights, and I've got full reviews on all of their functionalities, pros, cons, and so on. Now that's just about light, and basically the light doesn't change throughout the year, whether it's summer or winter, because they're pretty much just relying on artificial light. The light is very consistent throughout the seasons, so light is not the reason why these plants are suddenly springing back to life. The humidity in this room is always quite high, especially during winter. Right now it is actually 76% humidity. We have had the wettest August in, I think I read somewhere, 164 years, or one of the wettest Augusts in 160 years of weather recordings in Sydney. So it has been incredibly wet over here. It is actually the 2nd day of not raining non-stop for all of August. So naturally the humidity is really high. Outside it's like 99%, right? So it being 76% in here is actually somewhat enjoyable, and it's definitely lower because of the heating that we do. So humidity is great during winter. to the liking of these Anthuriums actually. I'm struggling more with humidity in summer because we can have really hot and dry weeks instead. But the main thing that has changed is temperatures. Now at the moment it's 21.5 degrees in here. I'm not heating this room, but I'm heating downstairs and hot air rises. So there's always a little bit of residual heat coming in here. But during the height of winter, let's say, it could easily go down to like 16, 17, 18 degrees and so on. But we are now going more into the 20 plus degree territory. Not outside, but let's say inside at least, with continuous heating. So it is just those few degrees, I believe, that make the difference, because the humidity shouldn't really be making the difference, and it's definitely not the lights making the difference. So I think just those 2 degrees extra can really make a difference in making these plants thrive. And these 2 degrees don't come at the expense of humidity, because it's just naturally a little bit warmer, rather than me heating this place with hot, dry air. At the end of the day, I don't really care exactly how the Anthuriums knows that it's spring, but they know, and it happens every year. And I'm just here for it, and I'm excited, because this is the time of the year that I'm looking forward to the most. Anyway, I think there was enough background on at least the conditions. We also need to address the care and my care schedule with them, my care routine with them. But I think that's going to become a little clearer once we maybe look at all of them in a little bit more detail. So I'm trying to take them out one by one and show them to you. But if that doesn't work out, then I might just bring you closer instead. And where do we start? Let's actually start. Should I start with the nicest one? Yes, let's start over here. Actually, I'm not starting with the queen because it's a bit of a mission to get her out. Let's start over here. This is one of my Anthurium crystallinum hybrids. Now this is a new leaf, as you can see, so beautiful. And what you can also see is that there is quite a lot of nice chunky roots that are growing into the pot over here. You can definitely see a lot of chunky roots coming from the stem into the moss, and then they're being funneled into the air rod mix down here. So let's address it. I've got an air rod mix over here. Actually last year in October I repotted my entire Anthurium collection, and they all got an air rod mix that is quite tree fern fiber heavy, because Anthuriums, in my opinion, do not like to dry out. I then provide a top layer of moss. Most Anthuriums are climbers, but they climb really slowly. So it's not worth the effort of making and maintaining a moss pile. Instead, I've just created a moss pile, but it has the same effect. It takes roots from the stem, encourages their growth, and then funnels them into the substrate in an attempt to ultimately just create a larger root system. Happy days. Now, I've had some fungal issues, and I've got some thrips issues with my Anthurium collection over winter, and a lot of leaves have suffered. Now over winter I don't necessarily like chopping all of the leaves off, because I know they're not going to be replaced that frequently. But now that I see new growth, I'm happy to chop off old leaves. With Anthuriums, I've noticed often once you chop leaves off, it actually encourages new growth. And with the way that I'm setting them up over here, all on one shelf, I'm not really aiming for each plant to be super lush. I'm really aiming for a lot of variety. I know they're all dark velvet and veiny, but I'm aiming for variety over here. And sometimes if a plant has too many leaves, it actually just like takes away light from the other plants and so on. So I'd rather have 2 beautiful leaves on each plant than 5 ugly ones, because then I'm just too focused on the ugly ones. So now that I see new growth on plants, I am happy to chop off quite a few ugly leaves instead. Let's take a few of these smaller ones out, because one thing I'm always worried about when I do these sort of things is that I just rip leaves by taking them out and so on. So that's why I try and keep them in their spot. Right, this one is Anthurium luxurians, one of my absolute favorites, and I did a full spotlight on this recently. Look at this beautiful new leaf emerging, so red. Then this is an inflow that I pollinated, and this is a new inflow. I do not want to pollinate this inflow, but I want to collect the pollen. Super beautiful. You can see a little bit of yellow edging. That was over winter. That is fine, but you can also see quite a lot of healthy roots in here as well. especially down here. I hope you can see, I hope not too much glare. Nothing really to do. I do want to repot this, but I'm not in a rush. I'm happy for it to just grow a little bit more and maybe repot it like mid-spring or something like that. But yeah, I think over here I don't need to chop anything off. These leaves are really beautiful and I love how they're all point in one direction, right? You can see they're all point in one direction. I'm achieving that by having a consistent light source coming from the front. The leaves want to face the light, hence a consistent display side. Okay, I think now I can get the queen out. She is heavy, so I'm gonna put her down. This leaf over here, my friends, is brand new. It is still unfurling, so it's still quite soft. I do not want to mess with it. There's an inflow over here as well. There. And I would love to collect pollen here as well. If I already have the pollen from the luxuriance, I would love to stitch those two together. Now that I got this leaf on the way over here, I am so desperate to chop this old leaf off. Look at this ugly hole over here. Definitely had some fungal issues. Overall, it's actually not that bad, but it's just been pissing me off. I'm gonna do something controversial. I don't know. I'm just gonna chop this bit off because it's pissing me off. And hopefully not having to look at this ugly bit is going to piss me off less. But if I'm still pissed off at it next week, I'm happy to potentially just completely chop the leaf off. Now with the queen as well, I am managing the petioles via twine over here. This newest petiole is now not included in this management. So let's see if I can undo this. The queen is one of the only plants that did not receive a repot last year. So I do want to repot this plant sometime this year, but at the moment it doesn't have that many leaves. So I don't think it needs like much more substrate, let's say. All right, I just push this in a little bit more, nothing crazy, because I also don't want to hurt it. Maybe I could do a little more. Good enough, I think. This pot is pretty root bound, so I think at some stage I could do something with this plant, but I don't want to disturb it. I want it to really grow 2-3 leaves in a row without the old ones getting really ugly. And maybe then I'll do something about it. I just feel like I haven't had the best run with her, so I don't want to introduce any more shock unless I have to. And I feel like at the moment I don't have to. But really happy to get a new inflow on her, because these elongated features of the queen I think are just super, super pretty. Let's have a look at this plant at the top over here. Anthurium Crazy Rubbish, which is a hybrid I made myself. Well, it's a crystallinum, but it was a crystallinum hybrid and I pollinated it with itself, so it's still a hybrid. Anyway, yeah, it's not looking, I think I had one leaf during winter, which was this one, which is a little bit smaller than the one that grew in summer. But look at this, a new leaf is coming out over here. That is very good. And nice roots. Again, you can really see how the roots come from the layer of moss and are then slowly funneled down into the pot. So yeah, nothing to do here, all looks sufficiently moist. Let me quickly address watering. This year I was being more diligent in watering these properly. For the longest time I basically just came here and just top watered them. Hopefully it was enough volume to drench it all without over watering it or without it sitting in water. The reason for that is because every time I move these plants out, I feel like I am bumping into a leaf, especially when they're really young and juvenile and like still in this stage over here, you know, even the tiniest little hole is going to turn into something huge by the time the leaf inflates, as we saw with the queen, for example. So I'm trying to not move them too much because they're just so vulnerable. And because they're in this shelf and they're all kind of intertwined at some stage, like I just caused so much damage by physically removing them from there. So I figured, you know what, it's actually less likely for me to cause damage if I just am less thorough with my watering. But this year I try and do both. Once a month I try and take it into the bathtub, thoroughly flush out the media as well to avoid mineral buildup. Also cleaning the leaves. I've also had too many thrips over winter in this room, and it's been going okay. I don't do it with every watering to reduce the chances of ripping things, and I try not do it when, like for example with this new leaf, I would try not do it, try not to move it, but once it hardened off, maybe then it gets a shower or something like that, right? So a compromise in between. Now when I take it into the shower, that's the flushing out cycle, no nutrient provision. With any watering in between, I do provide my normal GT Foliage Focus nutrient in a weak dilution. And my sign to water is when the top layer of moss is dry. I don't want that to dry out, because that is what keeps the plants moist and then funnels them back into the pot. And roots are attracted to moisture, and if they dry out too much, then we might be causing more harm than good. Ooh, oh my god. Oh, hear that? That would be my sign to water, but this plant is actually fairly resilient because it has super chunky roots. Look how chunky these roots are. You can see them poking out over here. Can you? No, maybe not. There, look at this one, so chunky. So that's something that I would, oops, I just ripped it, but ideally I would like to funnel that back into the pot. Look at these chunky roots over here. That's why I want to keep the moss moist, so these can keep expanding. Viterifolium honestly has not done the moist actually, but it's also okay. I kind of am happy for this plant to just be there. Like, I have no ambitions with it. I've never really found the best spot for it, but I think it's still nice, and it just adds a completely different element to my Anthurium collection. But I can definitely see a few yellowing leaves over here that I might just want to chop off. Like, nothing crazy yellow, but just makes it look a little bit unhealthier than it has to. And let's try and chop the right ones. And this one's looking yellow, no? Okay, good enough, I think. One moment, please. I do not like to procrastinate, so once I know a plant needs water, let's give her water. Hey, baby! That was the baby. I'll bring you closer with my phone with this pot setup. But over here, I can very liberally water without having to worry about overwatering. The problem here really is I let it dry out too much. Dry moss is hydrophobic, so it's going to take a little while to re-moisten. Most of the water is just draining through. Yep, have a look at this. The pot is hovering, or not hovering, I've basically put it on a little takeaway container so that it doesn't sit so deep, so that these leaves can trail over nicely. But that also means that excess water is just accumulating in there. Easy. Should probably at some stage empty that excess water to avoid mozzies. But I think this time of the year I'm not so worried about mozzies. Actually, seeing it from the front is much easier when deciding what leaves to chop, huh? Could have maybe done that earlier. Before I take the next one out, I want to show you something. I mentioned before that majority of the positioning is done by the lights, but over here, for example, I can also use the shelf to help me out. So you can see that these leaves aren't really facing straight forward anymore. This plant used to be rotated more like this, but this leaf would have kind of gone through here, which I don't want. So what I do is I rotate the pot and I use the shelf, the side of the shelf here, to tell the plant where I want it to go. And you can see the little bend that the stem has made as a result of it, right? So I'm using the shelf to help me with that. See, over here, for example, I use the shelf to bend it down and so on. Another good example over here of roots coming from the stem being funneled by the moss, and then, I mean, they're like oxygen, so sometimes they stick out. What I do is I just take a bit of moss and I just push it down. Hopefully it goes into the pot. And here actually is a little seedling of it. I popped one seed in here. I've done a full video on the pollination journey of this plant. This is my puppy X-Dresslery hybrid. New leaf over here. Just has the most beautiful sheen. Lots of inflating to do. Eventually it will be like this and have this beautiful sheen. This old leaf over here, you can see, has a bit of fungal issues. It's not the best, so I think it's time to say goodbye. It's not ugly, but I I didn't like it. Maybe see it better from the back, the fungal. I don't know if you can see that. Just yellow little dots. Delta Force, also done a recent video on this. And I repotted it in that video. And since the repot, again, you can see hopefully where my finger is here, a root funneled by the moss. I'll just take a little bit more moss and cover it so it definitely doesn't dry out. And down here, you can already see new roots. Over here, you can already see new roots since the repot, and that was maybe only 2 or 3 weeks ago. So this plant has always been the best rooter for me. Now it just really needs to grow some more leaves. But very happy with this plant. It has leaves in all directions. Another crazy rubbish. So the same one as this one over here. Oh, dry. Lots and lots of really good roots on this one over here. See, this is the leaf that was supposed to actually point this way, and I used the shelf to somehow make its way back there sometime last year, but it's time to say goodbye to this leaf. Felicia, bye. Again, left it for a little too long maybe, because the top is actually dry and now the water is kind of purling off instead of just being neatly absorbed, but that's okay. Try not let them dry out, but you know, sometimes what I'm aiming for in reality are two different things. Was that the whole shelf? Yes, so that was that taller shelf over here. Done and dusted. Let's move on to this side, which is not as successful, I think. Start down here. At the beginning of winter, all of the leaves over here were kind of ugly, so I completely deadheaded this plant. And these are now, this is the first leaf that grew over winter, and now it's growing this one. Look how round this looks with the closed sinus. It is a Magnificum Forgetii crossed with my queen. You can also see some nice healthy roots, the red ones coming through. Yeah. Nothing crazy, definitely nothing where I'm like, oh, I need to repot this plant this year. In general, because I provide liquid nutrients with my watering, I'm not really worried about plants being too root bound, especially with Anthuriums, because I chop off leaves frequently with my Anthuriums, meaning that they don't have to hold on to all too many leaves at a time. So, you know, I don't feel the need to keep giving them bigger and bigger pots. It then also might not really work with the way that I want to set up this shelf anymore. While we're on this one, I actually have this plant twice over here because it was a hybrid I made with a friend and I had a couple of seedlings. This one is the same plant, but it looks slightly different, I would say. It's not quite as closed sinus. I've repotted this very recently and I'm going to do a full video on this, but you can already see within the last 2 or 3 weeks, all of these, look at these chunky red, oh, maybe too glary. There's lots of roots, okay? Trust me. Definitely one of my favorites because when they first come out, they're super, super red. Now, I can see some new growth on it here, but I believe this is not showing some active growth at the moment because it is working on re-establishing roots instead. But they're the same plant, but I think they look slightly different. And again, I acknowledge that in the grand scheme of things, most of my Anthuriums look more similar than they do look different. So, when I say slightly different, the focus is really on slightly. Let's go with the one in between then. This is a Clavinorium hybrid that I've actually had for many, many years. It's never really grown amazingly, but I do love this newest leaf over here. It has a white sinus. I'm not too sure what it was crossed with for that, but it has a really white sinus. It has some nice ruffles and new leaf, new inflow. Happy days. I have already chopped off quite a lot of inflows because I don't necessarily want to pollinate all of my plants because I'm looking for my scissors. Because pollination also takes a lot of energy away from the plant and puts that energy, and that energy goes into the inflorescence and then infructescence rather than leaf growth. But this one has quite interesting features, so I would like to maybe at least collect the pollen. Again, amazing root health over here. It's looking pretty good. I hope you can see this. I really have the filming light on full strength to counteract the grow lights. Another Anthurium I've had for the longest time and it's just not really doing much. Anthurium Serenoi. This is probably the nicest leaf it has ever grown for me, and now it's growing a new one over here. I love the pinkish hue on this, but it's still so juvenile that I can't really see what it's gonna look like when mature, but just judging by the root system, it's dripping, just judging by the root system, it should be happy, eventually at least. So nothing to do here really. Another crazy rubbish, I do not need that inflow. This is already a hybrid I made myself. I don't need to hybridize that further. All right, unhealthy root over here. Can you see that root that was red and then started rotting? Not good. Over here are a few healthy ones instead. And I can see new roots coming from the stem. Let's address that. I've actually noticed root rot on Anthuriums quite frequently, and I know it's because of my lazy watering approach where I don't take it out, I don't let it drain, but rather I just water it in the pot and I hope that I use enough volume so it doesn't sit there. But it so often was too much, right? I've noticed that honestly having a bit of root rot in the pot is not really an issue. It doesn't mean that it always spreads to the whole pot and then all roots die. The plant just grows new roots instead. I'm not saying I recommend that level of YOLO, but for my Anthuriums, if I see a bit of root rot, I'd rather do nothing than panic and repot it and potentially cause more harm to the roots. So take that advice if you want to, if not, leave it. This Magnificum has one whopping leaf. It has not gotten the memo that it's spring just yet, but again you can see a little bit of root rot over here. But on the other side you can also see lots and lots of healthy roots, so it's okay. I might have just been a little bit too liberal with watering during winter. It's not that hot, the plants don't dry out as much, but it's fine, you know, I'll survive, and the plants will survive specifically. Alrighty. Clarinervium, also had this for a long time. It's never really grown very large for me, but that's also okay. Again, you can see there was a bit of root rot over there, but then you can see the roots are a bit brown and unhealthy, but then you can see the new roots coming in at the top, hopefully. I don't know. Here, new roots coming in as well. So I can see some healthy roots funneled by the moss, and I'm having an easier time keeping the roots in the moss healthy for sure. And yeah, it is definitely a result of my lazy watering technique. Now let's address something with this. This plant is a Magnificum Forgetii hybrid, and I've had it for many years. And when it grows, this is one of my favorite plants for sure. And every spring I take it into my greenhouse, and then it gets to grow in my greenhouse over spring, and it's super healthy. And then when I take it back inside, it declines much faster than all the others. I mean, this has, you can see I cut off all the edges already, but this is like this is bad fungal. this is fungal. The yellow, the like neon yellow, that is fungal. I noticed that with this plant much more than with any of the others, and I think that is because I grow it in the greenhouse every spring and then bring it back in winter. It just doesn't like that. So I think this year I'm not going to grow it in my greenhouse. It might not thrive as much, but I think it will then also not decline as much over winter. And ultimately I want to kind of have all of my Anthuriums on this wall rather than spread across different environments. I do actually just want to reduce the plants that I have in the garden into the greenhouse overall. So this year it's going to stay here. I can see it is coming back to life. Can you see this leaf over here unfurling? So there is hope, and there's actually 2 shoots in here. This one is the second one, and now that I cut off all the dead weight, I'm really hoping that this plant is going to thrive. It's in a black pot, so I don't know the root health, but I'm assuming root rot. Am I going to do anything about it? No. Is that going to look really ugly up there now? Yes. Am I going to do anything about it? No. Let's put you back and stay patient. Sweet. One moment. One more. This is my King Anthurium. Anthurium veitchii, and this was upstairs in my rescue section over winter because it was just a stump. Now it's actually grown 3 leaves in a row, which is pretty good for it. I've had this plant for many years and it's never grown for me. And I can see, oh shit, root rot yet again. You can see a healthy root and eventually it rots. It looks too wet. You know me by now, I'm not going to do anything about it. But I'm going to pop this over here so it can now join its friends. This is everything that I cut off. Alrighty, here we go. Apart from this plant looking a little bit emptier now, I think it's looking really nice. I'm really happy with my Anthuriums, and this is the first thing I see every morning. You're in my bed at the moment, so as soon as I open my eyes, I look at my beautiful Anthurium collection and it makes me really happy. I would love to have this shelf over here as well, but they actually don't manufacture that shelf anymore, so I'm stuck with this for now, and that's also okay. This year I'm trying to make the existing things work a little bit more instead of getting new things, but see how I go about that. Maybe if I get too much growth in spring and then suddenly the shelf is too busy, I'll change my mind and I'll find a new shelf instead, something like that. Now let's talk about my care strategy for these plants going forward. The conditions, as I mentioned, aren't really going to change. They're all going to stay here. Now I am determined to continue with my strategy and taking them to the shower more frequently, to hopefully flush them out more frequently and avoid overwatering, but also to keep them pest free, because pests was really one of the biggest things I've been struggling with over here. A lot of the leaves I had to cut off due to conditional challenges or because the leaves were getting old, but majority of the leaves that I cut off over the last almost like 6, 7, 8 months or so would be due to pest damage from thrips. And I treated using contender spray, but historically the best approach was always to proactively prevent them, and I prevent them by just keeping my leaves clean. I used to take my plants in the garden or in the shower every week for watering, and I would really clean all of the leaves. I have too many plants to do that now, but I think the more often I can do that, the better. Secondly, I'm definitely too liberal with my watering. I need to dial it back a little bit. So be it. I think in the grand scheme of things, I still can't complain. And thirdly, I'm not rushing at repotting all of them. I really only the ones that I feel like are really root bound and or there was maybe a lot of root rot that I discovered, and I think it would just do well with a fresh set of substrate. Last year I repotted all of them, and while it was somewhat successful, I think it definitely delayed the new growth of leaves, if you know what I mean. So I really want to try and do nothing for them this year, and see if that maybe even yields better results than the full repot I gave all of them last year. I suppose we'll find out. Alrighty, and that's it. If you would like to learn more about Anthuriums, I've got plenty of videos on them. Specifically, I've got a full Anthurium marathon where I combined all of my Anthurium videos I have ever made. So I'll link that at the end screen as well as in the description down below. Please give this video a thumbs up and leave a nice comment down below, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. Bye!